I've been shooting panoramic images for over 20 years now. Sadly though, most social media platforms don't serve this format very well, so I rarely get the chance to share them. But in my 16 years running a gallery, that wide letterbox shaped print certainly proved to be commercially successful, even though the vast majority of my output for most of my career has been upright and either 5:4 or 4:3 ratio. No one could argue that Colin Pryor wasn't onto a good thing shooting Scottish landscapes on a Fuji 617 camera though. I've never personally shot that format, but I have used a 612 roll film back on my 5:4 cameras. I've used sliding back to create panoramics from within an image circle of a medium format lens on a Cambo Actus view camera. And much more commonly in recent years, I stitch images together which were shot with my Sony digital camera and a telephoto lens. When you're faced with an epic scene, why shouldn't you try to capture everything without the compromise of a crop that would leave you able to make only a small print of all that drama you've captured? So here I'll share a few of the things that I consider when taking images to join later in post-processing. Okay, so I'm going to shoot a panorama here. Basically the sky is a little bit too low in the frame to get as much in width-wise as I'd like without having sky in. So I'm trying to basically make a panoramic image with right way down this valley here with the really bold, big, mature birch tree on the left, and then the tree that's possibly got a clematis or something growing over it in the centre, and then there's a couple of dead or denuded trees on the right-hand side. So it doesn't work even at 16:9. And if I did crop that even more, then obviously I'm making my file size quite small for my taste. So I opted to go for a kind of stitch panorama instead. And I thought what I'd do is just go through some of the processes I always use when I'm doing this. So firstly, the obvious one is to try and get the top of your tripod as level as you possibly can, use the spirit levels. But the most important one I think for me is to just pan the image, having got the tripod level, pan the image and if you can get a spirit level on the screen on your camera, just pan across the entire scene and make sure that spirit level but in your camera stays level right the way across. Your final stitch will of course crop any distortion out to create a letterbox image, but the closer you are to level at the time, the less you're going to lose. And the second one for me is I always set my eyesight isn't great, so I tend to autofocus my images and select the point for focus. But what I've done in this instance is I've selected a tree, focused it with autofocus, and then turned the lens to manual, which means that as I pan across the scene, it's not going to hunt for anything else. It's going to basically photograph every single frame on that correct focus setting, so that the scene right the way across will be focused at the same point. And then the other one is to set the camera itself to manual. Because what I don't want is any change in the exposure across the scene either, even though this is nice even flat light right now. You know, if you've got a darker area of the image, if you're shooting in aperture priority for example, then the camera's likely to compensate for that, and then you'll end up with a brighter frame somewhere in it, which has then got to be accommodated later in post-processing. So again, the less you can do later the better, so try and get it all right here in camera. And with this image, I'm going to stitch 3 horizontal frames together to make my panorama. If I wanted to have more detail and an even bigger file, bear in mind this is a Sony A7r 4, so file sizes are big. So my 3 images together might combine to make the equivalent of 2 entire frames, which would be 300 megabyte plus file easily. But if you wanted something really big, then I would basically turn the camera upright and shoot maybe 5 frames across vertically instead and stitch those. But when I am stitching, when I'm exposing my images, I'm making sure I've got something good and strong and contrasty in every single frame that overlaps a little bit into the next frame. So a good overlap. I would probably include 2/3 of each image across the frame, which gives the software when you're stitching the best hooks to kind of get its claws into to then blend your image together into one big seamless panorama. And finally, make a little note of what you've done. So what I tend to do is I make my last, this is a 3 image horizontal stitch. So what I'll do is take a picture of my hand like that, 3 horizontal. If it was 4 frames upright, whatever. 3 frames horizontal. I'm going to photograph my hand with the scene So at the end of that set of pictures, there you go, at the end of that set of 3 frames that I've just shot, there's another shot with my hand in that tells me that's the end of a set that I'm going to stitch together. A few more critical things to consider. Moving foliage and more critically moving water are notoriously difficult to merge. The example I've got here is an image from Boss on Harris. If you look at the close-up, you can see that the waves don't match. This was shot with my Cambo Actus, left side first, right side second, but the waves have moved. It doesn't matter how fast you shift across and take your second shot, water's going to have moved, so that doesn't really work. I haven't really found a successful way of making this image look believable. This image shot at Easdale is believable because it's a 1 frame, 1 shot image shot with a 612 back. So what you could do is use an ND filter of some description, either a 0.6 or a 10 stop neutral density filter to lengthen the exposure. Obviously low light would help with this as well. But again, warning here is that you're going to need to make sure that your sensor is spotlessly clean, because otherwise you'll be healing out the same set of dust spots again and again across the final image. And here's an example of an image where I didn't get the tripod set level on the Faroe Isles. As a consequence, I've got a curved C line, so yeah, that can be corrected in post-processing with lens correction or with kind of distortion and so on, but I much prefer to get it right in camera. Of course, there's no reason why a panoramic image has to be horizontal either. So here are 3 examples of vertical ones that I shot in the past with the 612 back on my large format camera. And the other thing is, of course, they don't have to be of a classic, traditional landscape view. The close-ups of poppies, the seed heads on the poppies in the field, that's just something I wanted to capture as much of the sense of the space of the field as possible. And the shed was long and wide, and it was the best way to get a large file of that particular subject matter. Well, once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'm going to leave you, as I usually do, with a small slideshow of probably what are some of my favourite panoramic images of some fairly spectacular moments I've experienced over the past 7 or 8 years as a photographer. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and please do also drop a comment into the comment section below as to maybe which one of these images is your favourite. I'd also be interested in hearing how any of you work around problems with moving water when you're stitching images together. Thank you.